On today's bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks, Shakeel Moore, the transfer guard from Mississippi State, has a broken foot. What it means for him and KU.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On today's bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be talking about Shakeel Moore, who has a broken foot. Thanks for making LOJ your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers tuning in to each and every episode and tuning into the bonus episodes. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to Locked On Jayhawks. So let's get right into it with our bonus show. Shakeel Moore, who is the guard transfer from Mississippi State. He's a senior. He's in his last year of college basketball. Apparently he had a broken foot that he suffered playing pickup basketball, just playing basketball, doing what he does. And apparently he had surgery on it already. I guess apparently it happened a week or two ago. So based on that timetable and what still needs to happen, there's another 6 to 8 weeks of recovery in addition to the time that he's, I guess, already kind of started that recovery process from. And we are exactly as of today, as of Monday, 8 weeks away, I believe, from the opener. So the good news is that that timeline would add up there, that he should be back for the start of the season. So, like, in theory, this could be a big nothing burger. But maybe they take it slowly. Maybe you don't rush him back. Maybe he's not back for the first game of the season, right? What happens if he is a little bit past what the timetable might be? Or what happens if he is rusty when coming back and they don't want him to play in the first few games? Or the flip side, the good news, like the positive spin would be, what if it does only take him, in the 6 week side of it, as opposed to 6 to 8 week, where he's back a few weeks even before that, and he's able to get back in the swing of things. I think regardless, though, this is a big deal from a standpoint of, like, those are very important practices. He was here for summer practices and stuff. I don't know about all of the summer practices because I think he joined kind of in the middle of it, but like he was here for some off-season work and being around the team and everything like that. But these practices are bigger than those summer practices, right? Like, you think of the summer practices, there's certain regulations and rules you can and can't do with like some of the NCAA stuff and how involved everybody can be and just how many hours you can have. And like, the practices are going to ramp up. The time is going to ramp up. The installation of plays and defense and everything you want to do is going to ramp up. And so if he's going to be missing practices over these next couple of weeks, you wonder if that could make it, because even though he is an experienced player and an older player, Bill Self still has a very intricate system that we've seen transfers, guys who are guards, who are experienced players, come over and struggle to make that transition right away. And so if you're having less practices as part of that too, that could make it difficult to maybe reacclimate playing with the team after missing some of those most crucial time periods for practices, meaning that, he could come back right in time if he's back in those 6 to 8 weeks and technically be ready for the opener. But if you're behind the 8 ball in the practices, then are you behind other guys in the rotation to start the season? Now, maybe you end up being fine by the time we hit December and you have caught up to that point and then everything's okay. Or what happens if, by being behind a couple guys in the rotation for the first couple games, what happens if, one of those players who maybe you would have normally been ahead of ends up playing well in that role? Do you end up being behind them until they kind of make a mistake and you get that opportunity, which could or could not come? So you hope that Shakeel Moore comes back fully healthy and this isn't an issue, both for him and for KU's sake. He provides a ton of bounce. He provides a ton of athleticism. That's a question with this too. Like, does this have any residual effect on those things? He provides a ton of dunks from being a smaller guard. He's a fun player who can get his own shot. He had a good percentage from 3 last year. A lot of ways that he helps this team. I think most importantly, though, of what Shakeel Moore does for this team when he's healthy is that in a portal class that KU brought in a bunch of good offensive players. But you have maybe some questions about the defensive end of the court, especially after you just saw KU get pick and rolled to death against Gonzaga in the NCAA tournament. Shakeel Moore was the biggest defensive piece, the biggest defensive addition that you made in the offseason. And you figured he was going to handle the backup point guard duties. You figured that he was going to be available to, when he was on the court with DeJuan Harris, form what would be an absolutely awesome defensive backcourt, 2 guys who could really pressure you and get steals and cause chaos at the point of attack. And again, that stuff can still happen. Like, this is an injury that, again, he's supposed to be back by the start of the regular season, but if that does hinder his start and he never gains back favor in the rotation, let's talk about the potential impact of that in a second on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We're brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, shots that give you the feeling of alertness and energy you need to get in the zone. 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling that they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with the promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Continuing on with this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and thank you to everydayers tuning in to this and every other episode. You can make your second listen our second show for the day, whether it was our Monday show or Tuesday show, depending when you're listening to this. And you can make, I guess, your third listen Locked On College Football or one of our other shows. Okay, what is the impact of this possible injury on KU as a team and on others? It's entirely possible this is a nothing burger, that this has zero impact for KU, and it has no impact on other players, that he recovers well. He recovers in even the quicker the timeline in 6 weeks, and he's able to use those couple weeks of practice to get back in the swing of things and regain whatever role he was planning on having coming into the season, which when you look at what we were projecting with our minutes projections, which we do have to update here at some point soon, we were projecting him for kind of that 14 to 18 minute per game range, playing backup point guard minutes. It was going to be interesting, the competition with him, Diggy Coit and Zeke Mayo, and I guess even Ryland Griffin for those minutes, at the 2 position rather specifically. It's entirely possible this is nothing and it doesn't have an effect on anything because it is a preseason injury. Better to have this happen now than, in season, in December, in January, something like that. But as we talked about, it's also possible that the lack of practice time puts him behind the 8 ball, and it gives opportunities for guys like Zeke Mayo and Ryland Griffin and even Diggy Coit to show what they can do in a bigger role and get those spots in the rotation. I feel like based on, if we go back to the comments on the Seth Davis Bleacher Report podcast that Bill Self gave, that Zeke Mayo, has been the best guy they've added so far, and paraphrasing what Bill Self said there. I don't know. I think if I were updating those minutes projections and lineup projections, I might move Zeke Mayo into the starting lineup and get a big bump in minutes regardless. But with this, I might even give him a few extra minutes that would come off of Shakeel Moore, just because of the questions of, what if this does cause, the other guys to gain trust when Shakeel Moore just doesn't have the opportunity to do so. I think the big one here that this could have the impact on is David Coit, Diggy Coit. He was mostly projected by a lot of people, including me, as kind of more like a spot minutes guy, that Jalen Coleman-Lands role. Hey, on a specific night, you're hot, you could play 15, 20 minutes and really fill it up and hit some big shots for you. But it's also possible that there's going to be a given night that you just might not play at all, or you might play like 4 minutes where you come in, for just one stretch to try to give KU a couple of threes in that game, and you go 0 for 2, and it's just like, okay, well, it's just not your night, right? I still think like the archetype of what the idea of Shakeel Moore is more up Bill Self's alley, which is like being that really good defensive guard than the guy who's just going to fill it up scoring. Like, we know Bill Self wants to go with the guy he can trust, who can play defense and hold his own. But my money is on Moore still being ahead of David Coit, still just because of those things, even with some missed practices, because keep in mind that David Coit missed all the summer practices that Moore got. And so even if he's getting more of the important practices closer to the season, at least Moore is starting ahead of him in terms of some of those practices, and with Bill Self valuing the defense. So I still think that Shakeel Moore is going to play a role on this team, is going to play a solid role on this team, but maybe it comes with a few shaved minutes just from trying to make up some of those minutes early on in the season. And then maybe by the time we get to January in conference play, assuming that he comes back fully healthy and looks like the same guy that he was coming into Kansas from last year at Mississippi State, then all of a sudden he is playing maybe that bigger role like we were expecting before this injury might have happened. All right, let's finish things up here. KU Volleyball is ranked 11th in the country. They got a tournament with 3 top 15 teams coming into town. Let's talk about it. Locked on Jayhawks today, brought to you by Ibata. Are you taking that dream sports or football vacation to maybe a fun game this fall, or maybe you're going to one of KU's road games this year, but you're kind of dreading the cost? Well, with Ibata, you get cash back on all of your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories and less time dreaming about them. The average Ibata user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That is IBOTTA, Ibotta, in the Google Play or App Store. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. All right, continuing on here with Locked on Jayhawks, this bonus episode. Wanted to make some mention here of KU Volleyball. They're ranked 11th in the country now in the latest AVCA coaches poll. That's a little redundant because the C stands for coaches. Nonetheless, they are off to a 6-0 start on the season. This is a huge week for KU Volleyball. They're hosting the Jayhawk Classic, and they've got a loaded slate coming in. Number 7, Purdue, who beat Kansas on their home floor. I think it was a 5-setter last year. I was actually at that game. It was a ton of fun to go to. Purdue had a ton of young talent on the team. They had like the number 1 recruit in the country who was just an absolute beast. Chance for Kansas to get a little bit of revenge in that game, but Purdue's really good. That's Thursday night at 6:30. Then they host a 6-1 Tulsa team whose only loss is to a ranked Baylor team. That's on Friday at 6:30. And then on Saturday at 3 p.m., which no KU football because they play Friday night. So perfect way to, get your eyes on you, is hosting Creighton, who's ranked 9th in the country. They're undefeated. So, you're going to be playing 2 top 10 teams this week. You're ranked 11th. You win both of those, you're going to be ranked in the top 10. Who knows? Maybe even the top 5. You split at the very least. You go 2-1 this week. You're still going to be feeling really good. Even if you go 1-2, you're competitive in the Purdue and Creighton games, even if you lose them. Obviously, that's not the goal. You're still going to probably feel okay coming out of this week. So the record of the 3 teams they're playing this week combined 17-1. And then you add in that Kansas is 6-0. The 4 teams as this part of the Jayhawk Classic this year, 23-1. So awesome volleyball week this week in Horejsi. Highly recommend checking it out. It's going to be the final bouts for them before Big 12 play. Them and BYU are the favorites, so should be a lot of fun and good opportunity to watch some good matchups this week at the Jayhawk Classic. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks bonus show. We'll have a full show on Tuesday, re-ranking the 10 games that are left on the KU schedule from least difficult to most difficult. And then we'll also get into a little bit of a flashback, what it could teach us from the Guaranteed Rate Bowl between KU and UNLV for this Friday. See you next time.